Crazy Horse was the leader, the war leader of the Oglala, Lakota, Cheyenne peoples on the high plains. We called them the Sioux, but that's a French word. Their real name was the Lakota. Now, what a lot of folks also don't know is that the Lakota, Cheyenne, Oglala Alliance partnership in the 1850s was the most powerful military on the planet Earth. They were more powerful than any European power. They were more powerful than the American Army. In fact, for over 20 years, they were able to defeat the American Army. They never lost a battle against the American Army. And they were able to keep their homeland on the high plains safe from being invaded by the whites. Now, there's all kinds of great stories about Crazy Horse. He was a military genius, no question about that. But my favorite story is a little more interesting than just military. There was this young lieutenant that had just graduated from West Point. His name was Lieutenant Fetterman. Lieutenant Fetterman was assigned to the plains in Montana, to the high plains, at Fort Kearny. And he told a local newspaper there in an interview that he could ride through the entire Sioux Nation with 3 companies of cavalry. With 80 soldiers, he said he could ride and through and conquer the entire Sioux Nation. His general gave him an assignment. He said, go out into the valley below the fort and protect the lumberjacks, the woodcutters who are cutting down firewood for the winter. You're to protect those woodcutters from the Sioux. Now, he strictly said to Lieutenant Fetterman, Lieutenant, do not, under any circumstances, for any reason, do not go over the first hill. Do not go over the first ridge. If you do, we can't protect you. Lieutenant Fetterman said, yes, sir. Ironically, he took 80 soldiers out with him to protect the woodcutters. A few hours later, as they were cutting the wood, this old, very frail Lakota man came over the ridge. He was barely walking. He was limping. His back was all hunched over. He looked like he was really, really old and very weak. He was leading one old pony that could barely walk. The pony was totally lame. They didn't know it, but this old person was actually Crazy Horse. So, this old man went about within 50 meters of the American army as they were guarding the woodcutters. He started yelling at them, insulting them. Still, they didn't pay any real attention. Lieutenant Fetterman said, he's just a crazy old Indian, don't pay any attention, just let him alone, forget him. So what did Crazy Horse do at that moment? Crazy Horse then, he had a breechcloth on. That's a cloth that you wear around your waist. He didn't have anything on underneath the breechcloth. He lifted up the breechcloth, and then he mooned the entire American army. He mooned the American army. Finally, Fetterman lost his temper. He got very angry, of course. So he ordered all his soldiers to go capture that crazy old Indian and kill him. Go after him now. Now the soldiers, they were happy for this. They'd been training to kill Indians. Here was their big chance. So they went after this Indian on horseback. They were on horseback. They charged this one old Indian that had insulted them and mooned them. It was Crazy Horse, as I said. Crazy Horse turned around, he started going back up the ridge. Really, really slow. Really slow. He could barely even walk. That's what he was pretending. He got to the top, and just before the soldiers overtook him to kill him, all 80 soldiers were ambushed by several hundred Sioux warriors who were hiding over the ridge. Now remember, Fetterman, what did he say? He said, I can conquer the entire Sioux nation with 80 soldiers. He had 80 soldiers that day. Here was his big chance to prove that he could conquer the Sioux nation. They were all there. The battle only lasted 10 minutes. Every single American soldier was killed that day, including Lieutenant Fetterman, who at the very end of the battle committed suicide. So Crazy Horse was in all the battles that the Lakota fought in the 1850s and 60s. Usually was the leader. He always led. He didn't order, he led. He fought against the Crow, the Blackfeet, the settlers, the militia, and the American Army. Now, by the 1860s, the whole Lakota, Cheyenne, Oglala alliance began to crumble. They were never defeated in battle, but the American Army had won the Civil War. So they sent their best soldiers out west to conquer the last remaining free Indians on the high plains, the last ones, the Lakota Sioux. The officers, they knew what they were in for. They knew they could not defeat the Sioux. They couldn't do it. So, they took a lesson that they learned from Sherman in the Civil War. They decided to destroy the civilization of the Sioux. Destroy their villages, destroy their teepees, kill their ponies. Most importantly, they made sure that all the buffalo herds around the Lakota villages were destroyed or chased away. So one by one, these little tribes surrendered to the reservation. But one band stayed out under Crazy Horse. It was after the Battle of Greasy Grass. We white people call it Custer's Last Stand. After Greasy Grass, most of the Lakota all went to the reservation. Crazy Horse, though, stayed out through that terrible winter of 76 and 77. The coldest winter on the North American continent in that century. They had no food. The army had taken their food. They had no blankets. They didn't even have teepees. They just had some sort of mud huts that they put together, covered by tree branches. They were so hungry that if one of them died, they couldn't even carry him out of the camp. So that spring, Crazy Horse was faced with the decision of his life, the hardest decision of his entire life. He would either fight the American army one last battle that he knew he would lose. He knew that they were outnumbered at this point 100-1. But he wanted to die in battle, to die with glory, with his honor. But he had all these old folks that were underneath him. And Crazy Horse also besides being a military genius, also had a really big heart. Throughout the 1840s and 50s, he had made sure that all the old people in his villages, all the old folks, all the people that had injuries or were sick or they had mental problems, he made sure all those people were taken care of. He didn't order people to do it. He did it himself. He gave of his own food, of his own ponies, his own buffalo robes to all those poor people. He wasn't rich himself, but he gave everything he had to take care of those people. So now, in this last decision, that's what dominated his thinking. Okay, I can die with glory, with honor. But then what about all these people, all those old folks that I've watched over all these years? Who will take care of them? So he decided, with a very, very heavy heart that he would surrender to the whites. Came into the battle, or came into the reservation, riding the one pony he had left. He also had his last gun. It was a Winchester, a beautiful rifle, that ironically, a white officer had given to him as a gift years ago. Crazy Horse came in leading his people. They were a really sad sight coming in from the high plains. But the people in the reservation, they knew what a great man this was. So they lined the roads while Crazy Horse came in, and they cheered for him when he came into the fort, hollering his name, sort of like Jesus entering Jerusalem. It was a really impressive thing. There was a young white officer going to take the surrender. This officer, we don't know his name, but he was just out of West Point. Very, very young, inexperienced. He was terrified of Crazy Horse. When Crazy Horse came up to him, he was literally shaking. Crazy Horse said, in a few words of English that he knew, "I make peace," and handed the officer his rifle. The officer took the rifle, looked up at Crazy Horse, and said, "Sir, you don't have to surrender to me. I should be surrendering to you, sir." So Crazy Horse now lived on a reservation. He did his best to get along. He tried to follow the rules and to live with the whites in that horrible, awful place, the reservation. But there was some sort of weird controversy that was started by a French-Canadian fur trapper. This fur trapper also spoke Lakota as well as French and English. He was also drunk almost all of the time. This fur trapper heard Crazy Horse say that the Nez Perce in Idaho, another tribe, were going to rebel against the whites and attack the white soldiers. Crazy Horse told this French-Canadian trapper, he said, "I will join the American army to help them fight the Nez Perce. I will fight until every single Nez Perce warrior is killed." This crazy French trapper, we don't know why he did this. I mean, maybe he just hated Crazy Horse. But he went to the white general and he said to him, "Sir, I just heard that Crazy Horse is going to join the Nez Perce and help them attack the American army and fight until every soldier is dead." Completely the opposite of what Crazy Horse had said. So this general knew, boy, we have to take care of this. We have to end this once and for all. He decided that they would arrest Crazy Horse and ship him back east to stand trial in the eastern United States, away from his people, away from the high plains. For political reasons, he was a smart general. He'd fought the Confederates for 4 years. He knew what he was doing. For political reasons, this general decided to order the tribal police to arrest Crazy Horse. The tribal police were Lakota, hired by the American army to keep order, to be policemen. They came to Crazy Horse's little hut. Crazy Horse was there with his mom and dad and his wife and his kids. They yelled at Crazy Horse to come out. Crazy Horse peacefully opened the little blanket on his door, stepped out into the sunlight, and there in front of him were 50 policemen, all armed with knives and clubs. He knew at that moment, oh my God, these people are here to arrest me. They're here to throw me in jail. That's the last thing Crazy Horse ever wanted. So what did he do? It was him alone against 50 people, 50 police people. He reached down, he grabbed a club, a tree branch. Then he reached down on the other hand with his left hand, and he grabbed a rock. Then he stood up as tall as he could, and he charged all 50 of those police Lakota. For a while, he actually was winning the battle. He was beating 50 people at once, swinging that club around and taking the rock and hitting them and whatnot. But gradually, they closed in closer and closer. They had him circled. They came in closer. They finally knocked him down and stabbed him. 2 hours later, Crazy Horse passed away in the presence of his parents and one of his really close friends who had been with him in every battle that he'd ever fought. They buried Crazy Horse, the tribal authorities and the white soldiers. They buried Crazy Horse in the tribal reservation Christian cemetery, the Christian graveyard. 2 days later, under the light of the moon, his parents and that one special friend that he had, they snuck out there in the cover of darkness. They didn't have any tools. They didn't even own a shovel. With their hands, they clawed away the dirt from his body. They picked him up. Once again, they had no ponies, no wagon. They carried him 15 miles that night out off the reservation onto the high plains. And then they buried him themselves in a spot where no one knows. So his grave wouldn't become some sort of horrible tourist attraction, which happened to a lot of the Native American chiefs. So when I was writing this rhinestoned record, I wanted to nail a song about Crazy Horse. I really wanted to do that. It was during COVID. But I couldn't quite get it. It was such a huge story, so deep, so involved. I couldn't quite get a unifying angle to get the song. One night I was sleeping, and I sort of woke up about half awake, and something told me, don't write it about Crazy Horse. Write it about that friend that he had, that friend that had been with him in all the battles with the Crow and the Blackfeet, at the Battle of the Rosebud, at the Battle of Greasy Grass. Through all the battles that this guy that Crazy Horse had been with, this friend had been with him too. So write the song about him. Then it was easy. The song just poured out. I was half asleep, didn't have pen and paper, so I just kind of turned on my phone and on the recorder button and just said these lines that were coming so fast. The next morning, then I sorted through it all. It was the longest song I'd ever written. It ended up being over 8 minutes. Longest song I've ever done. So, all the way now